Hello, everybody online and all my friends here. It's really nice to have people say to me, "Oh, we're so happy to have you here," and so it's really nice. I remember I came 2 years ago and didn't know anybody, just contacted Eddie, and still I felt really accepted, and it was such a good atmosphere here, and it was almost too good it made me naive in the rest of my travels with Adrian. Because it was. But I just wanted to share just a little bit of my journey. I've always really liked the idea of Jesus as the way, and how the things that happen to us, and also in history, how we can really learn in that way, how we can connect doctrine to things that happen in our life. And I just wanted to go through my own life experience, and particularly I wanted to go through my experience the last 2 years since I was last here in my travels with Adrian and just working with the message. So my parents are both not Christian. My dad was a Christian. He was Sunday, but he went to university and left the church. Very strong evolutionist, does vaccine research for the army in Thailand. But a very nice man. I think he has sort of missionary mentality when he went into that work. My mom is a Buddhist, also a doctor, but very supportive of where I've come, particularly when I stopped drinking alcohol. She really liked that. So, but I wanted to start off with, well, I'll pray first. Father in heaven, such an honor and a privilege to be able to speak in front of my brothers and sisters, a lot who are older than me and have experienced more, and so just ask for wisdom that I can honor them and that I can share with them things that I've been able to do that because of work or whatever reasons they have, they aren't able to travel, and I just ask that I can make the most of this time, and that you would be with me as I speak, and you help me. Many things I want to share, Father. Just help me to know what I should share. Just thank you, and please be with us here and as we fellowship together. In Jesus' name. Amen. I want to start off with, just from my experience, from Jeremiah 1:10. And this is God speaking to Jeremiah. To see, I have this day set thee over the nations and over the kingdoms, to root out, to pull down, to destroy, and to throw down, and to build, and to plant. In my experience, I didn't, especially early in my Christian walk, and even in my life, the last two parts of that I didn't experience. Growing up, I became very interested in politics, particularly 9/11 kind of really led me in that direction, and I studied politics. And in a secular mindset, when you're studying capitalism and communism and all these isms, mostly if you're a serious student and you're sincere and you don't get sucked into an ideology, all you're doing is breaking these things down, breaking them down. Showing the flaws in capitalism, seeing the flaws in communism, seeing the flaws in feminism, seeing the flaws in Buddhism. So there's a lot of this type of work, and your mind gets very used to what I consider skeptical or almost negative thinking. And of course, we can see from this verse that there is a place for that. And particularly as growing up in a very privileged background, I went to maybe the elite private school in Thailand. Most of my friends own all the big buildings in Bangkok, and a lot of them now are really successful. My foreign friends and working big jobs, important people in this world. And but the thing is, when you're in the world and you're trying to generate meaning in the world, you hit these blocks where it doesn't really work. And if you're honest, you have to kind of be like, and you don't want to be this bearer of bad news, but that's what I kind of felt I was like. I would tell my parents, say things like, look at this global warming and pollution and trash, and our civilization is destroying itself. How can I plan for my grandchildren and great-grandchildren? It's not this very kind of negative thinking, but it's in a sense true. And so when I was looking for answers, and when I came into Christianity, I came in this political angle, this angle of looking at the Bible. Even though I didn't believe in God, I would read the Bible and I would see which denominations were wrong. Even though I didn't believe in it, I just wanted to okay, Sunday's wrong. Okay, they believe in this, they believe in that, and just going through Jehovah's Witnesses believe this, Mormons believe this, and just breaking it all down. And it's just not really. And that's what I thought that's how I just thought. And so I came in through Daniel Revelation, and God manifested himself to me and showed me that he knew the future. So I believed in God, but I had no basis when I went back to share in Thailand. I had no way to give people something that would bless them. All I could tell them was, these things are all wrong. And that's
praise the Lord.
and there's a place for that, but I realized my friends would believe me. They could see that, some of these things that they've been taught were wrong, but without giving them something to replace it, it would lead to chaos in their life. And I realized I'm not really helping people. I'm just a chaos person. I'm just coming around, just undermining everything and causing people to question everything, and then they just don't know what to do with themselves, and their lives get kind of crazy. And so I thought, oh no, this is not really. Something's wrong. I don't want to be this guy who's just. Yes, I'm giving all this kind of interesting information, but I don't have a system to bring people into, and the church in Thailand is very weak. So I would bring my parents, my friends there, and they'd just be like, "What is this? This is." I could see it. I even felt the same way. So I said, you have to kind of study on your own. And most people aren't into studying. That's not their thing. I like studying, but I tell my friend, you you can't rely on people to teach you. You got to read these books. And they're like, what? No, man, I'm not reading these books. And you just tell me.
Damn.
And I also experienced this thing that. I was talking about Thais. They'll feed food to their dead ancestors, spirits, or they'll make deals with their idols. Very strange things to us that we can easily make fun of. It's easy to see what's wrong in other people's religions. But I can tell you that Thais, whereas they don't see the flaws in their own religion just because of their own pride, they can easily see the flaws in Christianity. Easily. And they will ask me things like, how is it fair that one man dies and that we're all cleansed? Like, these are very difficult questions. What are all these wars? Your God is love, there's wars. This just doesn't make any sense. And they're more polite than that, but that's what they're getting at. And I started to think about these things, and I realized, and that's how I believe that we learn a lot when we share, because I would share and I could see something was not right, so that we need a proper diagnosis to know what to overcome. And so I knew that something was wrong, but I said I'll just sort out the stuff that is clearly needs to be dealt with in my life first, which was obviously my drinking and my smoking, and then later on I'll try to figure out these other things. I just felt that if I just kind of had this impression from God that if I dealt with these sins that were clear, God will give me more light to let me know what to do in the future, particularly regarding my friends who I hoped to bring along and they didn't come. And so I was just looking, and I managed to, thank God, I managed to sort out a lot of issues in my life, and at least regarding the drugs and pornography and all these things. I really thank God. I really think that was allowed my mind to be clearer, that when the first thing that really struck me after my original conversion, which was through Daniel Revelation, was the Father-Son. And Tony's not here, but Tony was influential. He shared with a man named Michael. Michael and his friend Bernard were converts through Walter White. So was I. And when you come in that sort of negative theology angle, that's how you think, And they Michael shared with Bernard. Bernard he's German, went through it. He said, yep, this is true. He would share everywhere, and I was at somebody's house when he shared. And I had this immediate reaction, this immediate anger against it. I said, what's this? You're just attacking the church. But the thing was, I'm really thankful. I believe it's because I had a lot of experience coming out of evolution and coming out of the world. And also, I actually maybe want to thank maybe Buddhism a little bit, because Buddhism teaches really trying to be aware of your own subconscious and aware of where these emotions are coming from, especially if they're irrational. And I kind of realized that this anger or this hatred I was having toward this man, who I didn't know, and this doctrine that he was trying to share was irrational. It was sort of, there's no reason I should be so angry. And I realized, I said, where have I felt like this before? I said, oh, I know where I felt like this. It's when people used to share with me that evolution was wrong. And I would have this sort of anger come out. I said, oh, this means that there's something here I got to study, because I know this. This is the devil. This is how he works. He kind of blocks things out. Because I used to think, how come it is that I study the Quran, I study the I Ching, I study the Bhagavad Gita, communism, all these things, but Bible, no. And the only reason I could think that the reason was that it's the devil. He blocked it out. He gave me this false idea. And so I studied it, and it took me a long time. And actually, I wanted to say, as we're going through these main points, what it was that really centered me and anchored me. And with the Father, Son, I did many. I studied the history. I studied the pioneers. I studied Constantine. I studied all of Nicaea. But it still was not clear in my mind until I really got the idea of God and his Adam and Eve being made in the image of God and his Son. That just grounded it in a proper analogy.
Framework.
Yeah, something that was so substantial that I couldn't be pushed away from it anymore. It just seemed so logical that that's how God would do it. That because there was times where I was like not sure, going back and forth, and when I finally thought that, that's so beautiful, and it just made sense. And I'm really thankful for, that's just such amazing wisdom on the part of God to do it in that way, to make Adam first and then to take Eve out of his. This is genius. It's profound. And but because of my upbringing and my political thinking, I was super upset. I said, "Oh, this thing. How did this thing happen in the church?" I just started throwing bombs everywhere, and I emailed all the missionaries in Thailand. I said, "This is ridiculous," and I just think, but at the same time, I said, I'm thinking, I gotta go and talk to the pastor and maybe tear something up or something. But I also realized that this is kind of a technical issue, and it's still, yes, it helps me to Thai people when I share, because Thai people would ask me questions. Is Jesus God? And when you go through the normal way, they're like, nah, I don't want to get into detail, but I think you kind of understand. He's the son of himself, this type of stuff, right? So that helped me with that point, at least. But I still realized that there's got to be more. There's got to be more, and I couldn't really find where this more was. And this is actually the point I want to make, is that I believe this place is really blessed because systematic, positive theology is incredibly hard to find. It's easy to find breaking down negative theology, which there is a place for. But eventually, especially if you're doing missions, you need to have positive theology. You need to have things that, like Thai people, they want to hear blessings. They don't want to hear what's wrong with the world. Our lives are already difficult. We want to hear, how this God is going to help me, not how this God is saying everything is wrong and you're doomed. Basically, that's kind of we don't say that directly, but that's kind of the impression that you give, like, unless you keep the Sabbath and read the Bible all the time, you're doomed. It's kind of and they're kind of like, it doesn't sound like, that's not really helping my life, my day-to-day life. And so I knew that I wanted something more, and but I didn't know where to find it. And I'm just really thankful, just because of how God works things out, that he had Daniel and Marlisa in Thailand. And I really thank God, because they recommended me Adrian's stuff, even though they were unsure about many of the things he was teaching, which is really, it's understandable on their part, and it also shows a certain wisdom that Daniel had read a lot of Adrian's material. He had a relationship, somewhat. I don't know if he actually talked, but he had a relationship enough that even though he didn't understand the direction Adrian was going, and he was also very busy, he didn't have time to study it, he didn't understand the direction Adrian was going, that the relationship was still there, that he felt like, even though I don't get it, there should be something to it. Just because I know Adrian, and he's cool. So he told me to watch Adrian's stuff, and I said, "Oh, Adrian, you know the story. You guys have upgraded now with this and speakers." But this is about, this is 3 years ago or so. So some of the live streams were still
pretty average, right?
Yeah. Quality-wise, and just in terms of technology-wise. And also, they were not on the father-son, a lot of them, so I didn't know what was going on. Yeah. But I said, okay, Adrian Cook, God's Strange Act, watch that. Whoa! I like this a lot. And so actually, I got into Adrian's field not even through his. I still haven't read Return of Elijah. Sorry. I didn't read a lot of the. I had no idea about the feast. I just started reading all the material. I remember the first time I read the Canaan conquest book. I was like, this is. I immediately shared it in the Thai churches. I said, look, the only reason that there's war is because the people wanted the war, not because what a good. It's such a simple and clear answer, and all the Thai people, oh yeah, look at this war. Yeah, it's true. It's humans who want war. It's not God who wants war. I just thought, wow, it's just nice. There's such a blessing to be able to share things like that in the Thai churches and to show, because that's a big question they have. I've talked to people that they had many friends who studied the Bible, and eventually they just kind of fade away. And they don't really get the answers they want regarding these stories, and they're kind of, and so I remember reading that. I remember just studying all the character God stuff. I just really liked that, and I contacted Eddie and said, I want to go. I want to go whatever your meeting is. Passover, whatever. I don't get it, but anyways, I'm not a Christian, or anyway, I'm not. It was the same way with Ellen White. I just felt the Bible's true. Ellen White could be true too, so it wasn't as hard for, and I had this, I always felt that I'll just go and see. I don't need to understand all the doctrine. I'll study the doctrine later, and I did study it somewhat, and I remember in terms of if the first step was the begotten Son, connecting it to Adam and Eve, for me, the feast, the big one that really helped me was in Acts of the Apostles, where Paul was at Philippi. It says it. I'll just read it. At Philippi, Paul tarried to keep the Passover. Only Luke remained with him. The other members went on to Troas. The Philippians were the most loving and true-hearted of the apostles' converts. And during the 8 days of the feast, he enjoyed peaceful and happy communion with them. I thought, Paul did it. This is near the end of his life. And the Philippians are Gentiles. I don't see any big. It's good enough for me, I remember there was a Reformed church missionary in Thailand, and he was really trying to get me to sort of work with him and to lead, to start stuff in Thailand. And I told him, I said, oh yeah, but I think I should tell you, he's kind of bothering me a little bit. So I said, I'll shut this guy down. I said, I'm happy to work with you, but I want you to know that I keep the feast. And he was like, and then I never forget, we went through a sort of back and forth, and I said, what would you do if you knew that? He said, well, we would have to meet with you first and talk to you. I said, okay. And if we talked and I still wanted to keep it, what would you do? He's like, we would disfellowship you. I said, okay, well, there you go. And then he said, give me some. So I sent him this text. And you know what he said? I couldn't believe it. He said, well, Paul is a Pharisee. I said, that's not a good answer. I said, oh, this is.
Paul was a Pharisee.
So we know better than Paul, and I just didn't like where that was heading. And he stopped contacting me anyway. But and we came here, and I remember I was sitting next to Daniel when Adrian gave. I think there was 2 talks. Actually, he did Leviticus 26, which I had never seen. But the Sabbath, the feasts were all the Sabbaths. That really was like, wow. And then the living bread from heaven. And even Daniel was sitting there like. And he's a very calm, sort of quiet person. He was just wow, and so that idea, I even went, after that feast, I went back and shared to my friend, and he was from California, and he had some feast-keeping friends, and he was like, oh, Danny, do you have to do it to be saved? I don't like that idea that it's salvational, because I guess that's what he had heard from other feast keepers. I said, well, no, the idea is that on the Sabbath there's more Holy Spirit, and on the feast there's even more Holy Spirit. So it's nice time to get together. And he was just didn't even know what to say. And so I that principle of turning it upside down, instead of it being like, you have to do it or you're a bad Christian, and making it this time when God wants to bless, such a beautiful principle. And I've gone around with Ruben. It's one of my favorite. It's actually one of the first things I often share with groups, especially younger people. I don't do the whole feast thing, but particularly about the Sabbath, I share that a lot. That because this Sabbath thing, at least in Thailand, I think in many places, people leave the church because the Sabbath is just too difficult, and people's interpretation of what is allowed and what's not allowed is so variable. Mm-hmm. And particularly with the youth, they're just like, their family does this, our family does that. And it just becomes too hard and too complicated. And if you're sort of a leader in the church, you're always having to say this, and you're not sure. And it's such a tedious thing. And then I heard a sermon once in Thailand where they said something like, it's how you keep the Sabbath that makes you pass through probation. It's just that can't be right, And so when I share these things, the relief on people's faces, I just said, look, how about instead of thinking about it so negatively, like what you can't do, if God is with you more and wants to bless you more and is closer to you, what would you do? And it actually causes people to think. And I believe that God wants us to think. He wants us, so many of us are trained not to think. We just follow, and we don't know how to think. And we're told what to do, and either we do it or we rebel. We don't actually think through, we know one of our favorite verses is, come, let us reason together, and I said, look, it's up to you, if God is trying to help you, and we have to believe that God's Spirit is good for us, what would you do? If you're having problems, that's the day that you want to share, that's the day you want to pray. People love it, and I see just how helpful that's really in terms of anchoring me in the Sabbath system, the Sabbaths, or the times of refreshing. That's really been key, and I can see the fruit of it. Just like I saw the fruit of the sonship of Christ. That bore fruit in my life in terms of with my human father. Just helping me see Jesus as a real son and how he relates to his father. It's so helpful in me relating to authority, which most of us, especially Western people, and that's what I went to American school, we have trouble with authority. So that really helped me with that. And once you can deal with that, you're able to be blessed by authority, and you're able to relax. You don't need to be a leader. You don't need to be the top dog. You don't need to be your own ministry. And it's just such a... that took some time, and that's actually what I noticed traveling with Adrian. We meet a lot of people, a lot of arguments, just with people who want to be their own leader and your own. You want to be the channel that God goes through. And you can't get it from somewhere else. It's such a it's selfish, and it's also you're cutting yourself off from being blessed. It's just so sad. Like, like for example, like this is the one book I wrote, and you can see even this book, the failure of something, of political Christianity. It's still a tearing down book. And there's a place for that, but systematic theology, it's so difficult to do. What Adrian does is so difficult and so that I really wish that people would appreciate it more, because it's not that hard to write. Okay, you can be like, oh, Danny's a good writer, but it's really, I don't think it's that hard to write about, how the church failed in Nazi Germany. You just kind of collect data, and you kind of do some research, or how the missionaries were connected to the CIA. Maybe it's hard for some people, but for me to collect this sort of data together, it's not that difficult. But to really go through the Bible, I told this to my friend once. I said that, because I came through the conspiracy stuff and the political stuff, and I said that sorting out what's true and what's false in the political realm, in the secular realm, is difficult, but it's much, much easier than sorting out what's true and false in theology. Wow. The confusion that exists regarding, because Satan's so deceptive, it makes things like the JFK assassination or 9/11 seem simple and easy. Like those things are actually, you just kind of dig through, you can figure it out. But how, I told my friend, I said, Daniel Revelation, it's pretty straightforward, mostly, but how Jesus atones for us, I don't really get it. Like, how does that work?
To take it by faith.
That's not take it by faith, but especially at first, you need to take it by faith.
Take what by faith?
Exactly. And also, if you want to share it, you need to understand it. You can't just tell people you're taking it by faith. They're like, what? What does that mean?
Just follow me.
just do what I say, right? And so, and I thought that was always kind of interesting, and maybe that's kind of my Thai background, that sort of a lot of Christians take the Daniel Revelation and that sort of stuff as being the difficult stuff, and the atonement and Jesus and his life is sort of like basic Christianity. Everybody knows that, and not really needing further study. And I could kind of always tell. I remember when I did the first Bible studies with my pastor in Thailand, and I said, "What is this? Why is Jesus saying, 'Father, why have you forsaken me?' What's this? Doesn't make sense." And you ask. I went around asking these people. Answers I got, I wasn't impressed. So and that's at the central moment of the Christian doctrine, and I wasn't even getting. So I could see that there's some problems, and especially now as we're going through, a lot of this stuff, we really realize that this is complicated stuff. Theology is it's more difficult than philosophy. And it really requires God to help us and to bless us. And so regarding the character of God, I was so excited once again. And even though I had my failures with sharing Daniel prophecies, and I had my failures with sharing the Father, Son, I still thought that I could share the character of God, and people would get it, and at least my Western missionary friends, they did. I remember we were talking about the firstborn, and of course he had the famous quote in great controversy, single angel, destroyed Sodom, blah, blah, blah. And I read this quote over and over and over. And finally I said, I just don't think Jesus would kill the firstborn. I just don't think. I think, from my understanding, this has to be a fallen angel. And I think that this quote can be read both ways. Even though I see where you're coming from, and that this quote seems to be saying a holy angel. I just think from my understanding of Jesus' character, he just can't do that. And my friend said, well, we can't have a discussion then, because that's subjective. That's your subjective understanding of Christ's character. how can I argue with you? But it's a very interesting point because we reach a point that it's true. We have the mind of Christ, and that is kind of in a sense, slightly subjective because who is Christ? And we can think of who he is and his personality differently. But we can study these things out and we can start to show that, no, I'm pretty sure that this is how Christ is. Regarding that, we were talking about firstborn. I just wanted to share this thought I had because Adrian mentioned that we have the ministry of reconciliation. That's actually been one of the verses that really touched me from the very beginning that I was maybe open to Exodus 12. This idea of reconciling people to God, I really was touched by that verse. And I noticed something here as I was looking at this last night when we were talking about the firstborn. And I don't know if people have noticed this, but this was a new thought to me, is that God is speaking to Moses, right? And he says to do this thing with the lamb and I'll pass over. And the famous verse is verse 12, right? And remember, this is God talking only to Moses, okay? For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And generally, this is the verse that people remember. And they say, God smote them, right? But what I found really interesting is that later on, we know that there's another verse. What's interesting, so he tells a little bit more, and then, I never really thought about this, Moses calls the elders. And then Moses tells the elders what God told him. And he tells it slightly differently than how God told him. I thought this is really interesting. And he says, and the way Moses explains it to the rest of the people is in verse 23. And he says, for the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he sees the blood upon the lintel and on the two side posts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you. I thought that's interesting, because God didn't mention the destroyer. We know that Moses represents a mediator to his people, and when Moses explains what God tells him, he gives more detail. And he makes sure that the people understand that it's the destroyer who kills, not God. I thought, maybe that's the work that God is giving to us. That we are to take these more direct things and share them in the right way, in the way Moses is doing here. Because here it's very clear that it's the destroyer. And most people don't really read this one, they read the earlier one. And I thought, maybe this is part of maybe the work of reconciliation. That because I was talking to Gavin, and we thought, what if you only had the Torah? Like, and you just gave Torahs, to people, to Buddhists, they'd just be, what? And I thought to myself, well, the only way it would work is through good teachers. You need to have good teachers who teach the people. Well, prophets, they were teachers. And I remember first reading the Bible, and I didn't get very far before I hit a snag. I remember I hit Cain and Abel. I thought, what? What's wrong with Cain's offering? It's just, if you just read it, you don't know. It doesn't explain it in the Bible. Ellen White helps a lot. But you need good teachers. And this is the system. Like, we tend to think, I remember asking my friends, just like somebody asked me recently, who do you get information from? Who's helping you systematize and organize and teach? I said, just me and the Bible. Read the Bible. God teaches me, And I just thought, what? It's not God's system, We need to have teachers, and the teachers need to be taught by other teachers. It needs to be passed down and when things are explained, because if you're just a random person, you open the Bible, you won't get it. Especially if there's no New Testament.
Yeah.
So
that's why we don't give out Old Testaments anymore first. We give them the New Testament.
Yeah, I started doing that in Thailand too, because if you give the full Bible, they say, this is too big. And they said, we can't read it. And
We get
they have stuck, and also I believe that God has made it in a way that the New Testament, particularly the Gospels, are the easiest books to read. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are by far, when I want to practice my Thai, my reading, which is not that good, I practice with the Gospels, because if I read the Psalms, I don't know, it's too hard, just for my own capacity of language. So I think God has designed it that way. He wants people to read it that way. But our nature is to understand everything right now. I want to know everything, and everything needs to fit together before I believe in God, etc., etc. I just wanted to say, regarding the character of God, that the anchor point for me with the character of God was Luke 9. And I want to go there. And I'll never forget when I read Adrian's book, Ministration of Death, and then it's also in chapter 6, I think, of Agape. And we were I'm not sure if he preached it here the first time, but I heard it many times as we were traveling. But I don't remember the first time I read it, but Adrian's sermon on Elijah and John the Baptist, I think most of us know it. For me, anyways, we'll look at this, because we know that the soldiers came to Elijah and said, "Man of God, come with us." And Elijah says, "If I'm a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume these men." And it's a story that before I came here, I never heard preached. Ever. I never heard anybody. I used to listen to, what's it called? Audioverse all the time. No one ever touched that story. You hear the earlier part, Mount Carmel, because the way the Bible is written really interestingly, because it's Mount Carmel, and then there's like a gap. It talks about the kings and Jehu, and then it comes back. So it's easy to kind of not see it, because it's not right after Carmel. Anyways, so, and I just wanted, this is probably the last point I'll make. I remember I was at a Bible study in Thailand, and there was a young lady. Actually, she's very successful. She does insurance, speaks English really well, and she was interested, and so she came in for Bible studies, and very gentle Thai lady. Her parents are Buddhists, and we were going through Elijah, this story, not the second part, but this first part on Mount Carmel. And she's like, and I said, "Oh, you ever heard this story before?" She said, "No, never. I don't know who Elijah is. I don't know the story." I said, "Oh, you're privileged. This story's awesome. This story's cool. This story's cool." And I remember we were going through it, and we got to the part where, God accepts Elijah's sacrifice, doesn't accept Baal's, and Elijah kills all these men. And her face, I never forget it. Her face was like, it was like this sort of disgust and sort of shock. They're like, whoa, like, how many people? And I just thought, and I remember seeing her face and thinking that, wow, I just told her that the story is awesome and cool. And am I having this like Hollywood understanding? Have I watched too many Hollywood movies about victory over your enemies and whatever, Braveheart or whatever, this sort of thing? And I just saw it in her face. And man, I don't think so. I think something's wrong here, because she didn't like it. She didn't like the story, and she had to kind of repress it and block it out. And for a lot of people, I think they wouldn't have come back to study anymore. In the way we had taught the story, we said, "Oh yeah, they deserved to die," or whatever we said. And I just thought, this is not, something's wrong. And so when I heard this, Adrian put this sermon together about after Elijah killing, he's afraid, and then he calls down fire from heaven, and an angel has to tell him, "Don't be afraid, go with them." And then to connect it to Luke, this is what really, I felt like the character of God, it just anchored it, because Jesus himself says, and I just want to go through it. It says in verse 53, in Luke 9:53, they said, "They did not receive him," the Samaritans. They're rejecting the Messiah, "because his face was as though he would go to Jerusalem. And when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, 'Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elijah did?' But Jesus turned and rebuked them and said, 'Ye know not what manner of spirit ye are of, For the Son of Man is not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. I just thought, this is it. Jesus himself is telling me at least, this is the direction I need to go. That this needs to be studied. And I never forget when Adrian linked Elijah to the temptation of Christ. If you are the Son of God, and Elijah saying, if I am a man of God, let fire come down. When the soldiers themselves said he was a man of God. Man of God. So who is doubting who? And Elijah's doubting himself. I remember thinking that this sermon, it was the first time I'd ever heard a sermon I thought, this is straight from God. I thought that this sermon, putting all these pieces together like this, and the fact that no one had ever done it, when it was so clear, it was so profound, I thought this is from God. This has to be from God. And Jesus is saying it right here. He's saying, and these verses are deleted from the they're deleted from the later versions. So even conspiracies are involved here. So I thought this is it. It was one of the sermons that really touched my heart. You know, I really had that feeling of my heart being on fire when I read Daniel Revelation. But I never really had it when I listened to most sermons on audioverse. I never had that sense of just, and that was always my favorite of Adrian's sermons for a long time. And I just thought, the character of God. I mean, where to start the character of God? You could start with Saul, God killing Saul, and Saul killing himself. There's just so much. God sending the lying spirit, or you could start with Saul. I mean, the firstborn and the wars, and God giving a king in his wrath, and there's just so much there that I'm just so grateful for in terms of positive theology, and it's just amazing how God is able to use these stories that seem dark to be able to show his mercy and to be sort of this stuff that would reach actually Thai people. The things that actually were driving Thai people away, when explained right, actually they're like, wow, that's really deep. And so that story for me really anchored the character of God. And I have to admit that at the beginning, I didn't really realize the implications. I know Tony was here, Trevor was here, and they talked about God not killing. I didn't really realize that that's how far the thing was going to go. I just thought that Adrian was explaining just certain stories, not really that it was really going to be so systematic and so comprehensive in terms of what the implications of it were. And so I just thought that this is cool stuff, and I never forget. I just want to tell, I went to. So I really thank Craig, because Craig has sort of encouraged Adrian to invite me, which was such an honor. And we went to Pentecost in Talking Rock, and there was many people there, and all different beliefs, and I'll never forget when Adrian was presenting, and they had the microphones. There was lots of people, and the people rejected it. They almost rioted in the. And I couldn't. I mean, I think Adrian expected it. I think Utah for sure was just sitting there like, well, these people did, But I was shocked. I couldn't believe that people weren't even giving it a chance. I didn't know the history, that there was all this history, regarding this doctrine, and I didn't realize it was so controversial. So now I know, but at the time I said, why are they so? They won't even hear just these. You don't need to accept the whole thing, but these are cool little things explaining certain stories. I felt that was a big moment for me. I never forget some of the things I heard that day, because I wasn't someone so public as Adrian. People would really open up to me, and some of the things that they would say, we need our guns, just war, and we got to go to war, and Muslims, and that's just crazy stuff that I heard people say. I said, oh.
And they're the Christians.
Yeah, exactly. These are father, son.
And Adventist Christians.
Yeah.
They don't know what spirit they are. It's like they want to call that fire down.
Yeah, and it was a big eye-opener for me, and it was sad. I felt it really sad. I sometimes get sad when I look through Adrian's Maranatha Media and I see 20,000 downloads for Identity Wars. But the stuff that I think is so beautiful. And I know everybody has their own, of course Identity Wars is totally beautiful, that the whole framework is beautiful. But the stuff that really touched me, it doesn't seem like people are downloading. I said, how come they're not downloading 20,000 of this? And I remember we were at Talking Rock, and we had all the books out, and nobody was taking the character of God stuff. They're just taking this whatever silly stuff. I mean, I hate to say it, but silly stuff on.
Smashing the Pope.
Yeah. The Pope is wrong. I said, what? Who cares about that? You can look at it. You just.
No, that's 150 years.
I can close my eyes and type a random thing on Google and I'll see that. You know? So that was really quite shocking to me. But every country it was just nice to see how different countries reacted, just the different personalities. In our prayer, Jeff, we were talking about how beautiful it is that God's created all this diversity. And even though we can have the same beliefs, people are so different and reacted so differently. Like just in Africa, the way they sing and it's big amens, and it was just really, really cool to have that experience. So I just wanted to say that it was such a blessing, and I really feel that yes, it's really difficult, some of this stuff. But imagine how much more difficult it would be if we didn't have someone to actually basically do the work for us. I mean, that's why I told my friend, I said, Adrian is doing hours and hours of work for us. That's his job. He's a minister. That's what ministers are supposed to do. We're working all day. We don't have time to do Miller's rules and check 100 different places in the Bible. That takes like hours, and that's tedious. And Adrian does it. He tells us, thanks, Adrian. I mean, that's, why would we take that as like, why would we make that a curse, when that's just a lot of work that he's doing. I just thought that was a big lesson. Of all the countries we went to, that's the lesson I really got in Bulgaria, where they realized that this man's not going to come here often. And we want him. Talk to him. Yeah, we want, we're not gonna, we can always disagree with you or sort of argue with you mentally or whatever later. But while you're here, let's hear everything. This is interesting. And we're not going to have a chance, and we have a translator, and they just took it really positively. And I wish that even if we disagreed, and even if things were difficult, that we can really realize that this is new, and we can just look at the blessing side of it rather than being like, are we being taught something dangerous? He's telling us God's loving. I don't know.
Check this out.
So I've been really blessed, and I've taken. I'm happy to help. I feel really blessed to be able to work on some of Adrian's books with him, and to know Dayon. It's just such and also it's such a blessing to have the internet. I know some of you guys aren't on Facebook, but for me, in Thailand, to hear what people are doing in Africa, and it's such when you're feeling down and alone and negative, it's so helpful. And I was just thinking how hard it would be, 30 years ago to be outside the creed.
Yeah.
And now it's not such a big deal, and we can still even. Oh, and that's one more point I want to make is that when I was there at Talking Rock, people were saying that, Danny, you need to start your own church in Thailand. The church is hard. It's already so hard. In the Adventist church, they don't understand anything. How am I going to start my own church? And I just thought, oh man, they're like, you have to. No, it's just heresy. Got to do it. And I remember thinking, wait a second, but the elders in Australia, they're still in their churches. And so I thought, okay, I think I can still, if I'm wise about it, I believe I can still be honest. I don't need to be stupid, and I can still be true to what I believe in a way that blesses people. And I believe it's important. Jesus says things like, many things you cannot handle. So I think it's important to give people what they can handle, what they need, what fits them. And there's so much, notes and notes, and there's so many things we could share, but I think it's important to ask for wisdom to know what would help and not overwhelm people. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And I've had relatively, I can't be as systematic as I want. And that's really the blessing we have here, because it's sort of free space to be very systematic. I wish I could, but I'm able to give lots of truth, and I believe God can use it to sort of fit things together. And I think that the things that are happening here are going out. And I have one last anecdote I want to share that Adrian mentioned that growing up he really wanted to have a safe space. I think a lot of us did. We set up these little blanket fortresses and stayed safe. And I had that too. I really felt like that, and maybe because I'm secular and I didn't have this hope of heaven, but I had a little bit of addition to the safe space, is that in my safe space I would shoot missiles and destroy everything. Destroy everything in the world, and only I was safe. And I think this is a safe space, and these materials. The books are the stuff that we send out, and so I could kind of live my childhood dream, but in a positive way. And so I was thinking about God being a man of war, but He's a war against sin, and of course the last enemy is death. So and so that's sort of the fight that we want to do in a positive and a non-violent way. So that's just sort of some of the things I've noticed as I've gone on this journey, and I'm just so thankful to be here again. And
We're thankful to have you here.
Yeah. We love you, and we're thankful that you're back here.
Thanks. I'll close with prayer, maybe. Father in heaven, I just feel so blessed in this special time, and it's the blessing is much more tangible when I'm here with other believers, and we can fellowship together. I know you're with me even when I'm alone on the new moons and on these other times when I'm in Thailand. But to be with fellow believers is such a blessing, and I know many people have had years of being alone in their beliefs. I just hope that we can remember how blessed we are, and how privileged we are, and how grateful this is, and and we won't take it for granted, Father. Please be with us in this time. Please forgive us, and please give us a good spirit here, that we can all get along, and we can all feel safe, and that we can all share and have all our questions answered regarding your will and your character and your ways and your will, particularly in our own lives and in our own, so that we can go out to our own outside of this camp and know what to do and feel confident in our faith. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.